There's a monster roaming the streets of our town, stealing our children away. Sometimes he's dressed in cocaine white, other times it's gunmetal gray. And the only power that can fight him down, we banned and pushed him away. Now he's roaming the streets of our town, stealing our children away.
Welcome to ODTV Out of the Dark. I'm Skip Mooney Jr., the chairman of the board of Out of the Dark, Inc., and thank you for joining us for this new show. Over the next several weeks, we'll be discussing an illness called chemical addiction and the collateral damage that it's been causing to so many of our communities. We will also be exploring how one community has been addressing these issues from the local level up. You know, chemical addiction is now the fastest growing illness in the United States. It has become the common thread that runs throughout all the social issues that are destroying the very foundation of our society, one community at a time. This thread now runs so deep throughout every sector of a community. It runs through healthcare costs, immigration issues, unemployment and crime rates, loss of economic productivity, loss of educational opportunities, and many more, including the destruction of many of our families. It is an illness that affects everybody in a community, either directly or indirectly. By all reports, the spread of this illness continues at epidemic levels, and the resulting collateral damage has now become the #1 threat to every community. Since 2002, all the experts have been warning us that teenage drug use has moved to the experimentation of prescription pain narcotics, and now this involves children as young as at elementary age. Drugs that are so powerful and so addictive, they're comparable to heroin. However, the ugly truth is that our communities across the country have ignored these warnings, and we have let our children fend for themselves. This failure to act proactively has resulted in thousands of our children growing into adulthood with this devastating illness, and it's happening every day. Now the experts are telling us that the overwhelming demand for pain pills has driven the cost to the point where people are suffering and obtaining heroin, a cheaper and similar drug. We've only touched the tip of the iceberg. Chemical addiction is the elephant in the room that's been destroying everything around it, but we've done nothing to remove the elephant, but we just keep cleaning up the mess. It is time for communities to get together, and hopefully through shows like ODTV, Out of the Dark, we can all learn together how we can become a united front to solve a lot of these issues from the local level up. Thank you.
And welcome to ODTV Out of the Dark. I'm Yolanda Young, and this is my co-host Carol McFarland.
Welcome.
We've got two wonderful guests in the studio with us today. We have Skip Mooney Jr., who is the founder of Out of the Dark, and we also have Roy Ockert, who's a journalist here in Jonesboro. Now, Out of the Dark is a community organization that you've actually started in response to issues that have been going on in the community. So tell us about what those issues are.
Well, in 2008, I was actually got up one morning to get ready to go to the office and was reading the front page of our local paper, and the front headline said something to the effect that heroin overdose is not cocaine involved, and it was about 5 young people in our community that had evidently overdosed on heroin. And I thought, well, what in the world's going on in this community? And I kept reading the article, and the more I read the article, the less I liked the article from the standpoint of we had our drug task force people being quoted as kind of like, well, we didn't know there was really heroin around here. And then, you know, besides the shocking headlines, which you don't read in our community in the media, they don't talk about these issues. And so then I started thinking about the families, and most of these people involved were in their early 20s and young people, and my kids are in that age group too, you know, and I thought, well, what's going on out there? So it just kind of kept crawling inside of me, and I couldn't get it out of my mind, and my daughter and I were talking about it, and she started saying, yeah, Dad, don't you remember this or that or whatever, and so we decided to just write a letter out of frustration. And so we sat down and we wrote this letter. It was more like a plea to the community. It was out of frustration. I didn't anticipate anybody publishing it or doing anything with it. I was just upset about what was going on. And so we wrote the letter and we sent it to the Jonesboro Sun, and that's kind of how it started.
Well, Roy, why don't you tell us a little bit about what inspired you to pick this letter to publish?
Well, to go back to that first story first, what we originally reported was that 5 young adults from Jonesboro had been hospitalized, some of them in critical condition, with what they thought it originally was a tainted cocaine. And one of them happened to be the daughter of some friends of mine. So that certainly got my attention. And then the next day, I think we reported that it was heroin instead of cocaine. There was a 6th person who had also been reported to have taken some of this substance, whatever it was, but she left the state before anybody contacted her. Apparently wasn't affected by it as much as the others. But about a week later, I think it was, that I got a letter from Skip, and as editor of the Sun, one of the things I did was to monitor the letters to the editor. Well, we had a 350-word limit, and nobody ever got a lawyer to hold to 350 words, so it was considerably longer than that. But we also have a column that we call Soapbox, which was for people who had special expertise to speak on, to address certain issues, and this was certainly an issue that we thought was worth pursuing further. And as an attorney, Skip had some knowledge, even though maybe wasn't well versed in the drug situation, but certainly was worthwhile for us to run a longer piece, and that's what we did.
So after this, I mean, obviously the issue here and the focus was not just the letter. The focus is really about the issues that are going on here. So what did you learn after seeing that? What did you see from the community after this letter to the editor?
Well, it was really amazing. Of course, I practice law in this area, and I would just, after it was published, people started calling me and emailing me, and people would show up in my foyer and just wait to talk to me. And I didn't have any answers. I had a lot of questions because I went out and went to the schools and started asking, well, what are we doing in the schools about teaching our kids or educating our kids about addiction? I thought they had health classes that did that, you know. It's been going on a long time, and come to find out, we had a few teachers that were working on their own dime and time, as I like to say, and trying to help kids, but they weren't getting a lot of support. And so went to Drug Task Force, and I thought, you know, why aren't we out there fighting these dealers and whatever? And come to find out, we were really underfunded and undermanned. And so I'd go to different sectors of our community and just as an attorney ask questions. Now, I didn't like any of the answers. None of it made any sense to me. And so, you know, people would come in and talk to me, and they'd tell me different issues. For example, a grandfather called me one day and said, and I knew him, and he said, we've been raising our grandson, and he's over in Fayetteville, and we just found out he's messed up on pills. And then all of a sudden his voice started crackling, and you know, you could tell the emotion involved. And then he says to me, he says, I didn't even drink a beer till I was out of the military. How am I supposed to understand about drugs? And it just hit me. Yolanda, I've handled so many guardianships. I see it in criminal cases. I see it in personal injury cases. Addiction is a common theme that runs through a lot of this. And I started thinking, who's educating the grandparents? Not only are we not educating our kids, we're not educating the caretakers of the kids. And, you know, and it seemed like to me we were blaming different sectors. You know, let's blame the teachers, and let's blame law enforcement. Why hadn't they solved this? Or let's blame the media. They aren't talking about it. Or let's blame the parents, even though we're not going to give them the tools about it. I had no idea what addiction was. I mean, truly, I'm not any different than most people watching this show, up until I started looking into it and found out that it was really affecting a lot of families, it was affecting a lot of businesses, and something ought to be done about it. We're blessed with a community with a lot of resources. Okay? I thought, well, let's have a public meeting and see if we can have people show up, and maybe they can figure out the problem.
How'd that public meeting go?
It went great. I mean, over 200 people showed up. It was by word of mouth. The meeting basically was set up by word of mouth. We had people from all sectors of the community just wanting to get involved. And so my wife and I, we just stood, and I gave a speech, and most of it was about facts. As an attorney, you know, we're big on facts. And so I just laid out these legal pads, and my wife and I did, and we put medical on one of them and legal on one, and just different sectors. Because my whole thing about was, you know, the federal government's not solving this problem, and they're not going to solve the problem. The state government, and we found out subsequent, there's a lot of problems that we need to solve at the state level to resolve the chemical addiction issue. But it seemed like to me, I was concerned about what's happening here locally. And so I wanted to find out, get people to get involved locally to go out and find out what's happening here in this community, not what's happening state or national wide. Because I knew that we could resolve some of these problems if we got all these people together that had all these talents. And that's kind of the beginning of the Out of the Dark movement. I never wanted an organization. I don't have time for it, and it's blown up. It's one of the fastest growing organizations in the state.
Well, obviously, with any organization, and that we see anywhere within communities, not even just here, but any communities throughout the state of Arkansas or on a national level, when you get an organization together and you start bringing awareness, that's the big word, awareness. So what is your focus for Out of the Dark? Is it just awareness, or are you actually finding that there are solutions to these problems?
Well, there are solutions to the problems. There's a lot of things, not only from policy, but prevention and treatment issues, transitional issues about people. What we've been doing is recycling addiction. I mean, we get people out, we finally get them in a place, a safe harbor, where they can finally start to, first of all, addiction's an illness.
Right.
All right. So we finally get them some of them into a place, they get God in their life, their brains begin to heal, they get back to where they can get back in society, but we're not really giving them the life skills to help them that much. And then as a community, we just sit around and don't do anything for them. Yeah. And all they do is get right back to where they were. It's kind of interesting. This movement is more than taking an issue and dealing with it. It's a very comprehensive concept. It's a community concept. We have to attack or deal with all the issues, and that's the reason why we break it down in sectors. We got problems in the legal community, we got problems in the medical community, faith-based, the schools, the educational. So we've got like 6 sectors, what we call the local level up community model. And basically we have a board, and underneath that we've got a county coalition, and those are just grandparents, they're medical experts, they're legal people, I mean just the cross-section of the community that meet every so often to go back to the original start of going to different sectors, going out and finding out, well, for example, how many children are being born in Craighead County that are already addicted to drugs, and we try to get that information so we can educate ourselves. So it's not all about awareness, even though that's important. It's also about developing reduction action plans that the community can establish and go out and solve a lot of local problems.
Well, a lot of issues that you guys are talking about. We're so glad that you could be here to get this started and get us talking about what Out of the Dark is. We're so glad to have you here today.
Welcome back to ODTV. I'm Carol McFarland, and during this segment, it's just going to be myself and Kevin Richardson, our guest today. Yolanda and the others will be back in a few minutes. Kevin, I want to thank you for coming out today and sharing with us a little bit about how addiction affects the business community in our area. So why don't you begin just by telling the viewers a little bit about yourself.
Okay, well thank you for having me here. I'm glad to be here. Kevin Richardson, I have a business that's called PCS On Call. It's an answering service. And we answer for a wide variety of businesses in town, including doctors, doctors' offices, things like that. So as far as addiction goes, we see aspects of that through our business.
Okay. What aspects do you see through the business with addiction?
You get a lot of calls from people after hours. They know the offices are closed. Doctors may not have access to the records, so they'll call trying to get prescriptions. So that they can, have their fix for the weekend or things like that. So it keeps us busy. Okay.
What would you say the percentage of your calls after hours would be due to drug seekers?
It's gone down quite a bit over the last several years, simply because a lot of doctors they're changing their practices to help this as well, such as they won't take any prescription calls after hours. So therefore, a lot of people have learned that, and so we don't get as many. But still, we get, your average day, it may be 3 or 4% of the calls that we get are people calling trying to get prescriptions.
Okay. So the changes in their policy has reduced it. I think earlier you said maybe about 25%, and it's reduced it down to 3 to 4% now.
Yes.
That's wonderful, and that's really reduced the cost of you to run your program and for the doctors as well.
Yeah, definitely. Anything like that, you have to pass the cost on. So just like in all aspects of addiction, it costs all of us when you get right down to it.
Okay.
And so therefore, with the doctors making changes to their policies, then that has reduced some of that cost to us as well as to them too, because we take the calls, they have to pay us. So it's reduced their costs, and it's not in turn passed on to the doctor's patients and things like that. Drug addiction is big business. It costs us all a lot of money.
Okay, all right. Not only is there monetary costs, but I realize that you understand that there's also costs to the children in our community. Tell me a little bit about why you chose to become a board member of Out of the Dark and so interested in this coalition.
My 14-year-old kid.
Okay.
I realized one day that in order for him to have the best chance at a good life, I have to make sure that I'm doing everything possible.
Sure, yes.
There's a lot of peer pressure, especially this day and age. It's a lot different than when I was his age. But this day, with all the peer pressure and with everything that they have available to them, I have to make sure that he is fully educated and aware of the dangers. And I can't do that by sitting at home and not doing anything. I have to get out and do everything I possibly can so that I ensure that he stays on that right path.
Okay. All right. I understand that you involve him in the coalition as well.
Not just the coalition, everything that Out of the Dark does, I try to keep him involved. The Out of the Dark rally, student rally that we had on Main Street, he was there.
Good.
But anytime we have something like that going on, I try to make sure he's there and a part of it.
Okay. Well, tell me a little bit from a business perspective, why do you think it would be important for other businesses in the area to get involved in the Out of the Dark program?
Well, for one, again, addiction costs every business. It touches every business. It's not just mine. It's not just the medical community. It's every business, because the employees have, if the employees don't have addiction problems, somebody in their life, chances are somebody in their life does. So therefore that employee, they're not producing like they should for your business. So if you don't get involved, you're not helping the situation, and therefore it's going to continue affecting your business. It's going to continue affecting your bottom line. So it just makes sense for everybody to get involved, whether you're a business, whether you're just an individual, whether you have kids or don't have kids. It affects us all. It touches us all.
I truly agree with you. You know, I understand in the year 2009, addiction cost Arkansas alone $887 million. So like you, I do encourage the businesses to get involved in this area. Thank you so much again for coming out today. That's all the time we have, and just continue doing what you do. You're doing a great work.
Thank you.
Welcome back to ODTV. We have a wonderful guest with us here today.
That's right. We have Travis Eads here in the studio with us, a local song artist here. And Travis, you have written a theme song pretty much for Out of the Dark. So why don't you tell us what inspired you to get involved in this and write this song?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I didn't know I was writing a theme song at the time. I remember I was co-writing with Gloria Ross at the time. She brought me some lyrics. And I looked over it and I said, Gloria, you know this will never see the light of day on commercial radio. And she said, I know that, but why don't you just work with it, just see what you can do. And so I worked on it a little bit, and I was playing the song for somebody. There's a line in the third verse about a child who's alone at home, and a stray bullet comes through and takes the life of the child. I was playing it for someone, and they said, now, does stuff like that really happen? And it was at that point I thought, well, this is a song worth pursuing. This is a song that has to be finished. I didn't know at the time why it needed to be written, but I knew it had to be finished. And it was 3 weeks later that I heard about what Skip was doing in the community. So I took the song to him, and I played it for him. And it was at that point that both of us knew why that song was written.
Well, now I have heard, even Carol and I just sitting here talking about how powerful this song is, just gives you chill bumps. What were your thoughts when you finally realized that Out of the Dark was going to be the recipient of this song?
Well, it's a great honor for a songwriter. When you write something, you want it to have a life of its own. You want it to be able to find its context. And if it's commercial radio, great, or whatever it is, but when a song makes its way into the community and has a real purpose, that's awesome for a songwriter to have that happen.
Well, of course, we don't want our viewers to have to wait any longer, and I know that they want to hear the song just as much as we do. So, Travis, why don't you play that song for us, and tell us about the title of this song.
Well, the title of it is Stealing Our Children Away.
A young man on the corner of the street as a car drove slowly by. Shots rang out, he fell to his knees. A misspoken word took his life, and his mother cried. He was my oldest one. This just can't be. 16 and his life is done. A teenage girl thought she was grown, spent the day getting high, dropped out of school and lived on her own. Too many drugs took her life, and her mother cried. She was my youngest one. This just can't be. At 15 and her life is done. There's a monster roaming the streets of our town, stealing our children away. Sometimes it's dressed in cocaine white, other times it's gunmetal gray. And the only power that can fight him now, we abandoned and pushed him away. And now he's roaming the streets of our town, stealing our children away. She had no choice but to go to work and leave them alone. A stray bullet came through the wall, and now a 6-year-old is gone. And she cried, he was my baby son. This just can't be. This little child and his life is done. There's a monster roaming the streets of our town, stealing our children away. Sometimes it's dressed in cocaine white, other times it's gunmetal gray. And the only power that can fight him now, we abandoned and pushed him away. And now he's roaming the streets of our town, stealing our children away. When are we gonna take a stand against the evil running our land? Who'll be the first to cry to God and say, there's a monster roaming the streets of our town, stealing our children away. Sometimes it's dressed in cocaine white, other times it's gunmetal gray. And the only power that can fight him now, we banned and pushed him away. Now he's roaming the streets of our town, stealing our children away, stealing our children away.
Well, Travis, that was wonderful, absolutely
amazing,
wonderful. And
yes.
I love the part where it says, who's going to take a stand? And that really feels like that's the purpose of Out of the Dark, is taking a stand. Don't you feel like that?
Oh, absolutely. And if not us, then who?
Absolutely.
That's right.
And I really just love the fact that this goes together. This song, Out of the Dark, and it's a wonderful organization, and I'm sure you're proud to be a part of it.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Music's what I can do.
Right.
And I'm glad to be a part of it.
Well, Travis, thanks so much for being here. We're very glad to have you and getting to listen to that song. And Carol, of course, that's going to wrap up our show for this week, but join us next week as we continue to examine the different sectors of Out of the Dark, and we want to continue to look at what's being done within the community, and not just locally, but how it can be used in other areas, other communities, so you can do it in your hometown as well. Right now, we want you to be involved. If you want to get involved with Out of the Dark, all you have to do is go to our website, and that's outofthedark.org. We want to make sure that you are there and getting involved. You can also call the toll-free number at any time. We do want you to get involved. Travis, why don't you play us out at the end of the show and let us hear just a little bit more of this song?
Sounds good.
See you next week.
When are we gonna take a stand against the